It is 7. Sean, are you ready? Yes. Okay. All right. Good evening. We will call the meeting of the Auburn City Council for September 8th, 2020 to order. And let's see, read this. We will be holding this meeting virtually and telephonically. Per Governor's Emergency Proclamation 20-28, the City of Auburn is prohibited from holding an in-person meeting at this time. City of Auburn Resolution number 5533 designates City of Auburn meeting location for all council, board, and commission meetings as virtual. All meetings will be held virtually and telephonically until King County enters into phase 3 of Governor Inslee's Safe Start Washington's phased reopening plan. At this time, would you all please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the United States of America, the republic for which
it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. If you would all be seated. And Sean, would you please call roll? Want me to mute while you turn up?
Deputy Mayor DeCoursey?
Here.
Deputy Mayor DeCoursey?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Councilmember Baggett?
Here.
Councilmember Brown?
Here.
Councilmember J-Raj?
I'm here.
Councilmember Malinga?
Here.
Councilmember Stearns?
Here.
Councilmember Trump Manuel?
Here.
Okay. All right. And we will begin this evening with proclamations. I have 3 this evening, Council. The first one is the Mayor's Proclamation for National Recovery Month. Excuse me. Whereas behavioral health is an essential part of health and one's overall wellness, and whereas prevention of mental and/or substance use disorder works, treatment is effective, and people recover in our area and around the nation. And whereas preventing and overcoming mental and/or substance use disorders are essential to achieving healthy lifestyles, both physically and emotionally. We must recognize the 4 dimensions of recovery from mental health and substance use disorder: health, home, purpose, and community. And whereas we must encourage relatives and friends of people with mental and/or substance use disorders to implement preventative measures, recognize the signs of a problem, and guide those in need to appropriate treatment and recovery support services. And whereas an estimated 400,000 people in King County are affected by these conditions. And whereas to help more people achieve and sustain long-term recovery, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy, and our local agencies, King County Behavioral Health and Recovery Division, Battlefield Addiction, Downtown Emergency Service Center, Health Point, Nexus Youth and Families, Ray of Hope, Ukrainian Community Center of Washington, and the City of Auburn invite all residents of Auburn to participate in National Recovery Month. And now, therefore, I, Nancy Backus, Mayor of the City of Auburn, do hereby proclaim September 2020 as National Recovery Month. Let's join together to observe this month with appropriate programs, activities, and ceremonies to support this year's National Recovery Month theme, Rising Above It All, Wellness, Resilience, and Recovery, dated this 8th day of September, 2020. And our next proclamation. Whereas September 17th, 2020 marks the 233rd anniversary of the drafting of the Constitution of the United States of America by the Constitutional Convention. And whereas in 1955, the National Society Daughters of the American Revolution petitioned Congress with a resolution. This week of observance for the foundation of the American form of government was signed into law by President Dwight D. Eisenhower on August 2nd, 1956. George W. Bush officially declared the inception of Constitution Week in 2002. And whereas Public Law 915 guarantees the issuing of a proclamation each year by the President of the United States of America, designating September 17th through the 23rd as Constitution Week. And whereas patriotic celebrations are held to commemorate and emphasize the responsibility of citizens for protecting and defending the Constitution. And now, therefore, I, Nancy Backus, Mayor of the City of Auburn, do hereby proclaim the week of September 17th through the 23rd, 2020 as Constitution Week in the City of Auburn, and ask residents to study the Constitution and reflect on the privilege of being an American with all the rights and the responsibilities which that privilege involves. Dated this 8th day of September, 2020. And for those of you who have been on council for a while or perhaps have tuned in from time to time, you know that typically we would have Hilda Maryhugh here with us to receive the proclamation. And although we cannot have her physically here, she did send some remarks, and I would like to share those with you, Council. August 18th, 2020 marked the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment and part of the United States Constitution protecting women's rights to vote. Because of our country's courageous suffragettes like Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony, and others, more than 68 million women vote in elections today. Women of color were suffragists also and fought alongside the white women suffragists. Women were not allowed to vote, but were required to pay taxes and abide by laws that men voted into place. It was believed that women would destroy the Constitution and wreck the nation. In 1883, Washington Territory passed women's suffrage. Women won the vote 37 years before the 19th Amendment was ratified. In 1910, Washington State voted to send the 19th Amendment to Congress for ratification. Our state was the first state to do so. Do our daughters and sisters know the price that was paid to earn the rights for women? Women vote today because of the women's suffrage movement, which lasted over 72 years. August 26th is now commemorated as Women's Equality Day. Susan B. Anthony, suffragist, said, "Someone struggled for your right to vote. Use it." That's what the Constitution means to me, the right to vote. Check out the suffragist display at Sam's Shoe Repair on Main Street. Lakota Chapter, Daughters of the American Revolution, and I thank you for the proclamation. Hilda Maryhugh, Daughters of the American Revolution, National Defense Chair. And our third and final proclamation for this evening is for National Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. Whereas September is known around the United States as National Suicide Prevention Awareness Month, and is intended to help promote awareness surrounding each of the suicide prevention resources available to us and our community. The simple goal is to learn how to help those around us and how to talk about suicide without increasing the risk of harm. And whereas suicidal thoughts can affect anyone regardless of age, gender, race, orientation, income level, religion, or background. 10.7 million people thought about suicide, 3.3 million made a plan, 1.4 million attempted suicide, and whereas suicide rates are continuing to increase, the overall suicide rate in the US has increased by 31% since 2001. And whereas according to the CDC, someone dies by suicide every 11 minutes, and suicide is the second leading cause of death for people ages 10 to 34. And the fourth leading cause of death for people 35 to 54. And whereas the city of Auburn is no different than any other community in the country, but chooses to publicly state and place our full support behind local educators, mental health professionals, athletic coaches, PAC leaders, police officers, and parents as partners in supporting our community and simply being available to one another. And whereas local organizations like Suicide Prevention Services and national organizations like the National Alliance on Mental Illness are on the front lines of a battle that many still refuse to discuss in public, as suicide and mental illness remain too difficult of a topic to speak on. And whereas every member of our community should understand that throughout life's struggles, we all need the occasional reminder that we are all silently fighting our own battles. And now, therefore, I, Nancy Backus, Mayor of the City of Auburn, do hereby proclaim September 2020 as Suicide Prevention Awareness Month in the City of Auburn. And I encourage all residents to be the one to take the time to inquire as to the well-being of their family, friends, and neighbors, and to genuinely convey their appreciation for their existence by any gesture that is deemed appropriate. A simple phone call, message, handshake, or in this case, elbow shake, or hug can go a long way towards helping someone realize that suicide is not the answer. Dated this 8th day of September, 2020. So 3 very important proclamations this evening. There is so much going on in our community, in the world right now, that it is very important that we focus on those who are struggling. We're all struggling in some way, shape, or form, but please remember to reach out and pay attention to those who may be struggling a little bit more because of the current situations in our country. All right. All right, we will move on to agenda modifications. Do we have any agenda modifications?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, do we have any new business?
No, Your Honor.
All right, we will go to public hearings. We do have public hearings this evening. And any interested person was invited to submit written comments voicing approval or disapproval on the proposed payback agreements. All written comments should have been received prior to 4 p.m. today, September 8th, 2020. And I do not believe we received any comments on any of the public hearings. Is that correct? But I will, yes, I'm still going to open them, but I just wanted to make sure. All right. So the first public hearing is for pending ordinance numbers. Oops, let me see here. All right. Public hearing for pending ordinance number 6770, sewer payback agreement for utilities developers extension. A public hearing to consider proposed ordinance 6770, which authorizes the mayor to execute sewer payback agreement PBK number 18-0002, utilities developers extension. I will open the public hearing. Ingrid, is there any, or anyone, is there any staff presentation for the public hearing?
No staff presentation tonight. All 3 of these agreements were discussed with the council at the August 10th study session.
Thank you. Council, do you have any questions? All right, and we received no public comment. Therefore, I will close the public hearing on ordinance number 6770, sewer payback agreements. The next public hearing for pending ordinance number 6771, water payback agreement for utilities developers extension. A public hearing proposed ordinance 6771, which authorizes the mayor to execute payback agreement PBK number 180003, utilities developers extension. I will open the public hearing. There were no comments received today. Council, do you have any questions? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. The third and final public hearing today is for pending ordinance number 6772, street payback agreement for traffic signal. A public hearing to consider proposed ordinance number 6772, which authorizes the mayor to execute street payback agreement PBK number 18-0004 traffic signal. I will open the public hearing. We had no public comment received today. Council, do you have any questions or comments? All right, I will close the public hearing. We will move on to audience participation. This is the place on the agenda where the public is invited to speak to the City Council on any issue. Participants can submit written comment via fax, mail, or email. All written comments must be received prior to 7 p.m. on the day of the scheduled meeting and must be 350 words or less. Comments may be mailed to City of Auburn, attention Sean Campbell, City Clerk, 25 West Main Street, Auburn, Washington, 98001. Faxes may be sent, attention Sean Campbell, City Clerk, to the number 253-804-3116. And comments may be emailed to scampbell@auburnwa.gov. We have no correspondence this evening. Oh, but Sean, you did receive public comment, correct? Yes. Do you want to?
So the first public comment is from Brian Prickrell. He expressed concerns about city leadership and police training. The next public comment is from Emmon Witter from King County Bar Association. They spoke in support of Ordinance 6786. The next is from Rob Davis. He expressed concerns about biker safety. The next one is from Terry Anderson with the Tenants Union of Washington State, expressed support for Ordinance 6786. The next one is Chad Check, spoke in opposition of Ordinance 6786. And Bob Zimmerman expressed concerns regarding the city's readiness for natural disaster.
All right, thank you, Sean. We will move on. There is no correspondence this evening. We will move to Council Ad Hoc Committee reports. Council Ad Hoc Committee chairs may report on the status of their ad hoc council committee's progress on assigned tasks and may give their recommendation to the City Council, if any. We currently have the Finance Ad Hoc Committee, and that is chaired by Councilmember Baggett.
Thank you, Your Honor. Our ad hoc committee, consisting of myself and Councilmember Stearns, reviewed approximately 90 pages of claims vouchers totaling approximately $5.2 million and $2.5 million of payroll vouchers. We have included in those vouchers, claims vouchers, approximately $200,000 worth of CARES funding for Auburn businesses, which the city has passed on from the, which I believe that we received this information and the money from the, I believe the federal government, if I'm not mistaken. So anyway, we have reviewed all of these vouchers. We have no questions, and we recommend that the council approve these vouchers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Baggett. The money, the CARES Act funding did come from the federal government, but since we are not a city the size of over 500,000, the money went first to the state, and then the state has distributed that funding, just in case we received a direct distribution. All right, we will move. Are there any questions for Councilmember Baggett? All right, we will move on to the consent agenda. All matters listed on the consent agenda are considered by the City Council to be routine and will be enacted on one motion in the form listed. Deputy Mayor DeCoursey.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Jayraj.
Oh,
Councilmember J. Raj, you are muted.
I'll second that motion, Your Honor.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor DeCoursey.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight's consent agenda consists of the minutes of the August 17th, 2020 regular council meeting, the minutes of the August 24th, 2020, and the August 31st, 2020 study sessions, and the minutes of the August 27th, 2020 special council meeting, the claims vouchers as identified by Councilmember Baggett, for the period covering August 13th to August 31st, 2020.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments for the Deputy Mayor? Hearing none, all those in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say no. Motion passes. We have no unfinished business this evening. We will move on to ordinances. Ordinance number 6757, an ordinance amending section 6.35030 of the Auburn City Code relating to the restraint and registration of potentially dangerous dogs. Deputy Mayor DeCoursey.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I'd like to move to suspend the rules for ordinance 6757.
Thank you. And does that need a second? Okay. All right, so we have a motion to suspend the rules. Councilmember Stearns.
I was going to second, but I wasn't clear if we need to.
Yes, we
Okay,
do.
I'll second that motion. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And can there be comment on a motion to suspend? Is there any comment or question on the motion to suspend the rules? Councilmember Trout Manuel, did you have a question?
No, I was just going to do the second, but you called on Councilmember Stern.
Okay, I'm trying to keep track of the raised hands on the side, so I just want to make sure that I'm not missing someone. All right, we have a motion to suspend council procedural rule number 3.1 in 2, requiring an ordinance to be included on a study session agenda prior to being included in a council meeting agenda for consideration. Since there is no discussion, all those in favor of the motion to suspend the council rules, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say no. All right, the motion to suspend passes. We will go back to ordinance number 6757. Do we have a motion? Deputy Mayor DeCoursey.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to adopt ordinance number 6757.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Councilmember Stearns.
I move to second the motion.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from council? Hearing none, all those in favor of ordinance number 6757, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say no. Passes. Ordinance number 6770, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to execute a sewer payback agreement for a utilities developers extension between the city of Auburn and DCT Hudson Distribution Center, LLC. Councilmember Malinga.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. I move to adopt ordinance number 6770.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Brown.
I would second that motion, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Malinga.
Yes, thank you. This ordinance authorizes the mayor to execute a sewer payback agreement for the utility developers extension between the city of Auburn and the DCT Hudson Distribution Center, LLC. The payback agreement would allow the developer to recover partial costs related to design and construction of sanitary sewer improvements.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from council? All those in favor of ordinance number 6770, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say no. Passes. 6771, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to execute a water payback agreement for a utilities developers extension between the city of Auburn and DCT Hudson Distribution Center, LLC. Do we have a motion? Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to move the adoption of ordinance number 6771.
Thank you, Councilmember Trout Manuel.
I would like to second that, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Brown.
This is another opportunity for the city to work with developers to ensure water access to citizens and other businesses.
Thank you. Questions or comments, council? All those in favor of ordinance number 6771, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say no. Passes. Ordinance number 6772, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to execute a street payback agreement for a traffic signal between the city of Auburn and DCT Hudson Distribution Center, LLC. Do we have a motion? Do we have a motion? Councilmember Stearns.
I move to adopt ordinance number 6772.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor DeCoursey.
I'll second the motion, Your Honor.
Thank you. Councilmember Stearns.
Thank you, Your Honor. This ordinance authorizes the mayor to execute a street payback agreement for a traffic signal between the city of Auburn and DCT Hudson Distribution Center, LLC. There was a scrivener's error, and the correct ordinance number for the street payback is 6772. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Questions or comments? All those in favor of ordinance number 6772, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say no. Passes. We will move on to ordinance number 6781. And we have a staff presentation this evening before I read the ordinance. I believe Director Tate.
Yeah, good evening. First of all, I just want to make sure that my audio is good on everybody's end. Good. Good evening, Deputy Mayor, council members. Ordinance 6781 is an ordinance that has been before City Council during study sessions on July 27th and August 24th. If you recall, on August 24th, there were still some questions, and during study session, of course, council members don't vote. So there's still some questions about different concepts that still need some fleshing out. And we thought we'd bring the ordinance back here this evening and talk about a few of those items. So since the date of the initial presentation, the ordinance has been modified to reflect a few of the changes that had been suggested. It includes additional legislative intent from the early version. And in the August 24th study session, the administrative procedure and practice was included as part of the packet as well. The agenda bell in your packet does describe modifications that were made as a result of council feedback, as well as a description of some other topic areas. And as I mentioned during that study session, the ordinance was developed in coordination with the multi-departmental effort. So Auburn Parks, Arts and Recreation, Human Resources, Legal, Public Works, Police, and the Department of Administration. And I'm here speaking on behalf really of the collective group. And there's a few things that we want to call out and talk about. The first item is that on page 130 of the packet, there's what I think is a fairly substantive change from an initial version, and that is how available overnight shelter is defined. And you may recall that in an earlier version, it was defined as a shelter that was within 40 miles of Auburn. And this version now replaces a distance, a specified distance, which is, relatively, no matter what number it is, relatively arbitrary, and really relies upon services that are within either Pierce or King County, since we're a 2-county city, and we participate in different efforts regionally in those 2 counties, and taxpayers pay into services within those 2 counties. So that's kind of the rationale behind that change. And you'll see that reflected kind of in the middle of that page, on page 130. And it's, I guess, more formally under section capital D1, small letter B. So I wanted to call that out. And then the other item, which I'll speak for a few minutes about, is just about the enforcement provisions. And there was conversation at both study sessions about the pros and cons and just kind of the philosophy of civil penalties versus criminal penalties. And I'll say that in this version that's before council, we continue to advocate for a criminal penalty or criminal trespass process as the appropriate penalty rather than civil penalties. And I want to call out the reasons why for council to consider. First of all, with a criminal trespass, it creates a firmer enforcement backstop, and it ensures that it's meaningful and removes us really from our current cycle. And there are civil penalties involved in the current cycle and the current approach. And when I say the current cycle, I mean that our approach is really, I don't know how to describe it other than to say, from an enforcement perspective, we push people around. So we find them in one location, we tell them that they shouldn't be in that location, tell them the reasons why they shouldn't be in that location camping, and then we provide some notification that they should be moving out of that area. And what happens is a week later, 2 weeks later, a month later, we're having the same engagement at a different piece of property with the same people. And it's hard to break that cycle. So we have that experience. That's a real experience that currently occurs. I think that the criminal trespass immediately captures attention and actually leads to more meaningful conversation right from the beginning, because there are consequences. And we all hope that we don't have to trespass people. We really want to work with people. We've talked about the philosophy before, and it's a service first philosophy. But if the individuals that we're working with know that ultimately that is the penalty, or that could be the penalty, they take it serious, and it initiates the conversation. It gets us, fast forwards us right to the conversations about what are your real needs? What sheltering needs do you have, and what other types of needs do you have in order for you to break the cycle, and for us to really take a humane approach towards working with folks who are experiencing homelessness. We also think that it's important to send a message to the broader community as well, that the city doesn't accept that lands purchased for other uses are appropriate to be used for overnight camping. So when we buy land for parks, and we buy land for open space and environmentally sensitive areas, or for non-motorized transportation corridors, whatever that is, the purpose that we're buying it, that the public has an expectation, and we think a reasonable expectation, that that's how the property should be used. And uninterrupted camping in parks and along streams and on sidewalks is inconsistent with intended use of the property. And when you get to civil penalties, I just want to be real clear that civil penalties have a long-term detrimental impact to the person who we'd be handing out a civil infraction to. If we hand over a ticket and say, here's a fine, our experience is that someone's probably in that, if you're homeless, your priority is not going to be to spend $50 or $250 on paying a ticket. Your priority is in a different place. And what ends up happening is that people don't pay. And what then happens is those fines either go to collections or they get before a court and become a bench warrant or something like that. Things like that happen, which actually become really big detrimental impacts when people are trying to obtain housing or employment later on. So, when someone's experiencing homelessness, obviously they've had better days in life. And, they might be kind of in a hole. And it's hard to get out of that. And we think that the civil penalties can actually push someone deeper into that hole. I think also with an approach that it uses civil penalties, it informs the message out to the community becomes that the approach we currently take of pushing folks from one place to another is a tolerated approach by the city, an approach that that we believe, or it looks like we believe, that that's a humane approach when ultimately it keeps people in a state of homelessness for far too long. The perception or the reality could be that if we're not breaking the cycle, there is the population, the homeless population remains in place, moving around the city, and just like the rest of the city population grows, the homelessness population grows as well. And that is not the trend that any of us want, of course. And we've seen what happens in other communities where the population grows and it looks like it's hard to interrupt the cycle, and before long it becomes hard to manage. And I think that with I know it's not intended, but with a civil infraction process, and because that leads to us moving people around rather than breaking the cycle, people will perceive that as homeless encampments taking priority over parks and the environment, and that it's okay to, where you see human waste and needles and garbage and things like that, to remain within our stream buffers and to enter our streams and wetlands, and which we won't tolerate. So we spend taxpayer dollars on mitigating that by going in and cleaning it up on a routine basis. So, we spend tens of thousands of dollars a year to clean up encampments. So I realize this is a real challenging area for some or all of the council members on which way to go in this direction. But given the service first philosophy that's articulated in the ordinance, I really believe that the need for trespassing will be rare. It's possible, but I think it'll be rare. And while that may feel like it's criminalizing homelessness, I think that couldn't be further from the truth. Trespass is an action that would only be taken when specific circumstances are in place, and that is that sheltering is not available. A person is refusing to comply with a order to not camp on non-park public property, and a person is refusing to accept services and refusing to leave. If a shelter is available, if sheltering is available, why give up on a person by allowing them to remain outdoors, where they really have intense exposure to weather, sickness, addiction, other dangers? And I think that with a firmer backstop, but a softer and more compassionate approach from the beginning, we have the ability to transition people out of homelessness. I think we have a better way of doing that. And the last thing that I would say, I guess there's two last things that I would say. One is I really encourage, and this is based on my own experience last week, for anybody to be able to spend 2.5 hours with Kent Hay in the field. I was able to do so on Friday morning last week. And it was enlightening. We walked through, he took me through the bushes and the woods, and We talked to a lot of people. And what was really cool about that experience is that they all know, I mean, Kent's been here since April. They all know him. They know him by first name. He knows them by first name. It's a cordial and sincere greeting and dialogue between people. Every single person that we interacted with was really appreciative that he's there because he's offering help. When he's out there, he's asking what their needs are. And you know, I could watch a few situations where he's already helping someone, you know, get their ID or working with Social Security to get their payment, and you know, he's hand holding them through that process. And I mean, personally, it makes me proud when you go out into the field and you see that the compassionate approach that actually is occurring. I also think that if for those rare instances, if he doesn't have the ability to have you know, that tough backstop that he probably never wants to use, that it can have the effect of neutering the approach, I think. And they need to know that he means business, and his business is, I'm here to help you, and I expect you to work with me to get help and to get you into a much better place than you are now. And we even had an experience where we were walking on a trail and someone came up and said, word on the street is that you're the guy that can help me. And it's a person that Kent didn't know. So they're coming to him, which is, I thought was really cool as well. So really the last piece was that we did receive a letter today, and I think that council was probably forwarded to council from the National Homelessness Law Center. I don't have a lot of feedback to offer on the letter, except one, I think that it was providing feedback on the very first version of the ordinance based upon commenting on the 40-mile distance. And also it really talked about more about the penalties and less about what the philosophy and what the you know, part 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 before you ever get to penalties. So it didn't really address those areas, which makes me think that it was an earlier version, since some of that's articulated in the administrative procedure and much of it is in the legislative findings as well. And then the last comment that I would make on the letter is that just to remind council that we did have 2 rounds of legal review, one through the city attorney's office and one through WCIA. And in both cases, both sets of attorneys did not find a conflict with Boise. So I think that despite the comment letter making a statement of that they think that the ordinance may have some involuntary effect of criminalizing homelessness, in my opinion, the only way that it would result in criminalizing homelessness is if we didn't implement it the way that it's written. I guess I would say that, you know, again, the backstop that the trespass element offers ensures that when we have an interaction with our homeless population, it's not issuing a ticket and walking away and thinking our work's done, because we've done no service to the homeless community if our approach is to ticket them. So I do realize, and I respect very much that there are other opinions about you know, what the ordinance should say and what the approach should be, but I think it's really important you know, for council to understand that the city staff believes that that is the appropriate tool. So thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. All right, let me read the ordinance into the record. Ordinance number 6781, an ordinance relating to camping and occupying public property and amending chapters 2.22.210, 2.22.220, 9.50.020, 9.78.010, 12.32.020, 13.12.
Pages, I don't know why.
13.
Oh, wow. You're everything.
There we go. 13.48.170, and adding a new section to chapter 9.50 of the Auburn City Code. Councilmember Stearns.
Oh, so I wanted to, so I guess I wanted to make an amendment, but I guess first I would need to move the ordinance. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so I will move to adopt ordinance number 6781.
Thank you. Is there a second? Deputy Mayor DeCoursey.
I second the ordinance motion, Your Honor.
Thank you. Councilmember Stearns.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you, Jeff, Director Tate. That was a really good presentation. And certainly the changes you've made or the city has made to the ordinance from what we've previously seen are really important and you know, really good. So I guess I wanted to know what's the appropriate step for me? Should I make them?
Councilmember Stearns, right now you should be explaining the motion. We make the motion, there's a second, and then there's an explanation of the motion.
Okay, so the motion is to approve the ordinance, which is the City Council ordinance relating to camping and occupying public property and amending the chapters that the mayor just read into the record.
Thank you. All right, now, are there any questions or comments?
Is now when I would do that?
Yes, I was just wanting to make sure because I want to make sure that everyone has the chance to speak before someone speaks again. But if you are wanting to make an amendment, I do not see that anyone else has raised their hand.
Oh, okay, thank you, Your Honor. So I wanted to bring 3 amendments to the ordinance. And if it's okay, I'll start with the very first one, which is to remove the criminal penalties in the ordinance.
Councilmember, can you point to where you are in those so council can follow along?
Yeah, can I share a screen? Is that okay?
I don't know that that is possible. Okay, yes, go right ahead.
Okay, wow, I have a lot of screens up. I think this is the correct one. Yes, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, so it would remove the criminal penalties in sections 2 and 4 and replace them with the civil infraction penalty that's already in section 1. And section 2 is on page 3 of the ordinance. I'm sorry, yeah, section 2 is on page 3.
Somebody at the door?
And section 4, that one would be on page 7, with the big letter E. So those are the 2 criminal penalty sections. And my amendment would be to replace those with the civil infraction and just using the language that's in section 1. And then you probably can see, oh, wow. I've never used Zoom before. Yes, I'm sorry. So you're looking at the, I thought I was scrolling to myself. Okay, I'm sorry. So in the draft ordinance, there's the, I'm looking at section 1. That's the current existing civil infraction. So my amendment would be in section 2 and right down, right there.
So, Councilmember Stearns, what we are seeing on your screen is civil, not criminal penalty amendments.
Okay, I'm totally not seeing that, but that is what I'm hoping to see. And I'm sorry because I don't see that. And I'm trying to find it. Let me, I cannot see my own screen.
Why don't you try unsharing?
I will stop share.
There we go.
Okay. And then if you don't mind, I will go.
You need to, what Sean is saying is you need to share your screen and not a document.
Okay. So I'm going to go back to that particular screen. Okay. And so that's my first amendment, is to just simply replace the criminal penalties in section 2 and 4 and replace them with the civil infraction penalties. And I explained what page and what section the criminal penalties are in. And then my only, I just keep it short, simply that my reasons for suggesting that we do so are that criminal penalties, criminalization, it does not address the real causes of homelessness. We know that predominantly it's lack of affordable housing. We know that criminalization only makes the problem of being homeless worse. There's nothing that putting someone in jail, putting someone who's homeless in jail will do to make their situation better. Once you're in jail, once you've been arrested, you have a criminal record, it reduces your chances of finding a job, of renting a home, or going to school. It makes that so much harder. Thirdly, criminalization disproportionately impacts racial minorities and military veterans. And then lastly, as we know from the Boise versus Martin case, criminalization punishes people for doing what they have to do anyway to survive, which is to sleep, to rest, and to protect themselves from the element. So that is why I am offering this motion.
So, Councilmember Stearns,
Yes.
You said you had 3 amendments?
I do have 3, but I'd like to consider them one at a time.
Okay, you need to make the motion then. And then
Okay,
I'm
sorry, Mayor.
Go ahead and make your motion.
I move to remove the criminal penalties in sections 2 and 4 and replace them with civil infraction penalties by adding the following in each section. Violation of this section constitutes a class 1 civil infraction pursuant to RCW chapter 7.80.
All right, is there a second? Councilmember Trout Manuel, I see that you had your hand up, I believe, for discussion. Okay, well, I can see who has raised their hand. Councilmember Jayraj, were you wanting to second that motion?
Yes, Your Honor. I move to second that motion.
All right, thank you. And so now we will open it up for discussion, and that is the amendment that Councilmember Stearns has provided. Councilmember Trout Manuel.
Well, I have to say that I sort of agree with Councilmember Stearns because it will affect those people of color and our veterans that are out there on the streets that can afford to live in a home, to get into a home. And then my other question was that how far are we sending these individuals to find housing when we do approach them and they're looking for a place to stay and we don't have it here in Auburn?
So Councilmember Trout Manuel, that is why in the ordinance itself, it says within King County or Pierce County, because the taxpayer dollars right now are going to human services within both King and Pierce County. So the goal is to obviously find shelter and then housing within the city of Auburn. But because taxpayers are paying into those human services throughout King and Pierce County, that's why it was changed from a 40-mile radius to simply state in Pierce or King County.
Okay, thank you, Nancy, Mayor Nancy.
Council member, let's see, I think Council Member or Deputy Mayor DeCoursey.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess first I want to point out a statement that was made in the ordinance, and then what Director Tate said regarding this, and then a question around that. So this is on page 2 of the ordinance, or page 126 of our packet, and it relates to the fines and penalties. Fines and penalties are to be imposed as a last resort, and only those in instances where members of our community refuses to comply, et cetera, et cetera. So my question there is that, so let's say an officer contacts someone in this situation, and if this is a first time situation, what is the officer's discretion relating to that? And is it, and I think it's not, but is it automatic that if there is refusal to comply, that the misdemeanor arrest can take place immediately? And then secondly, the paragraphs above that, we talk about the administrative practices, including housing, mental health, and drug addiction. I'm just curious as to if we find somebody in those positions where they may refuse to comply, but they're having an episode or a series of episodes related to mental health issues or substance abuse, what is the approach there other than fines and penalties in this? And for me, that goes both for whether it's criminal or civil. So what do we do in those situations?
So I am going, first of all, I will tell you that no, it's not an automatic thing. It is a tool in an officer's toolkit, if you will. But Kent Hay, our outreach coordinator, is on the meeting tonight. Kent, I don't know if you are able to unmute and perhaps address Deputy Mayor DeCourcy's questions regarding what are the options, and perhaps even speaking to your own experiences, as I know that you've excuse me, had numerous encounters of that type already.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Can everybody hear me? See me? Yeah. Good. So yeah, to answer your question, so when we address somebody who's camping in a park or something, and we get to that point of when I first encounter somebody and offer them help or a place to go, and if they don't want to, then I do let people know that you cannot camp in the parks. And I might give them, depending on what's going on, is I might give them the next morning, because I show up every single morning. So I say next morning, if you're still here, then you could be trespassed, and I'm still offering you a place to go. So when I do get there the next morning, most of the time people are gone, but some people stay, and then we have that discussion again. But if the police have to be called, if we get to that point, it's a notice that you're trespassed, but it's not an arrest. You're noticed that you're trespassed from the parks. Now, if you come back or you're still doing that, then now you're violating the no trespass order. So it's not a you're still here, you're getting arrested. It's now you're trespassing, you have to leave. And now if you don't leave, then it could go to that point. But it again, it's only gotten to that point one time. And now somebody's experiencing mental health. So I have a lady right now who's currently in the park who I've been dealing with since Wednesday. And so knowing her situation, and she knows who I am, and I've offered her plenty of times to go inside and go to different places. And I caught her today. She's still there, and I told her that if I came back and she was still there, then, she could be trespassed. And when I found her today, she was going through withdrawal, and she had another guy there, the third guy, who's been in that situation with her. And so because she was in so much pain and kind of rolling around, I told her I'd come back in the morning, and, we're going to have to discuss this and figure out what we're going to do, but something has to be done, because in that situation, they're lighting fires back there. They're using a restroom back there. We're cleaning up constantly behind them. There's needles out there. There's people who go to those parks and have to, there's kids who go back there. There's people who go to the rivers to go look or fish or whatever, and they have to come upon that and step in feces or needles. And so those are things that we have to address.
Thank you. All right, Councilmember Jayraj.
Did I raise my hand?
Your hand is raised on my screen, so,
I'm sorry, I didn't lower it after.
okay. All right, thank you. Councilmember Malinga.
Yes, I wanted to know, I think from Councilmember Stearns, when you say the class 1 civil infraction penalty, what is that? Is that a fine? What is that exactly?
That is a fine, and it's what we currently have in the statute for, and it's in section 1 and in section 2, and it's a fine of up to $250. So it just allows the city to make fines up to $250. It doesn't tell the city what they actually will do. I had, for instance, looked at Olympia, and they have statutorily defined 3 tiers of like 50, 125, and 250. But just keeping it the simple 1 cent really gives the city discretion to set the dollar amount.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yes.
So if we already have the civil 1 infraction, is that not working? And that's why we want to move to the criminal misdemeanor potential penalty? Is that the reason?
Kent, would you like to answer that?
So I would tell you that in this one, I want to make something clear about when we're talking about money. So when I'm working with people and they come to me, most of the time, folks have evictions on their records where they owe money. So some people could owe 1,000, 5,000, 3,000, and that's what stops people from getting to apartments. A criminal trespass doesn't stop anybody from going into an apartment. Nobody cares about a criminal trespass on your record when they're renting to you. But they do care about is that you have money owed to an apartment manager or money owed to somewhere, and they want that paid before they allow you to come in. So, one thing I would tell you is I'd rather go to court and advocate for somebody for a criminal trespass, and it might be thrown out, or it might come to community service hours where somebody has to participate in cleaning up some stuff, rather than leaving people in the park where people are being assaulted or stabbed and trying to go to court for somebody on a felony charge rather than a misdemeanor. Does that answer the question?
Yes, I just want to, can they get that off their record, that misdemeanor? Or
yeah, so it could, it depends on, what the prosecutor decides to do with that case. They could do so many different things. They could dismiss the case in interest of justice. They could get somebody community service or community court. When we get that up and running, it could be dismissed off their record if they complete something. So there's a whole bunch of things that can go on in court when someone goes there.
I can just simply add that, having worked on people at re-entering, once you have a criminal conviction on your record, it's almost impossible to get it off.
Again, like I was saying, though, with the misdemeanor criminal trespass, and I've been doing this for 20-something years of dealing with folks, is I've never had anybody who has been turned away from an apartment for a criminal trespass.
Are there any other council members who have questions regarding this amendment? Deputy Mayor DeCoursey.
Thank you, Mayor. So, question for Kent. So, Kent, on the criminal trespass, have you seen in your career where people have had issues of obtaining jobs related to that? Because typically, from what I see, once you have even a misdemeanor or a gross misdemeanor or a felony, naturally, in some respects, it's almost impossible to seek and gain employment.
Yeah, and I could tell you, I've done a lot of jobs, and one was writing resumes for people and helping people with jobs. I do that right now when I'm working at the Ray of Hope. I've helped people get jobs who are out and who have some criminal history. And so, it's much easier to help someone get a job with a misdemeanor than it is, and it depends on what kind of misdemeanor. Again, a theft will keep you out of the job, right? A criminal trespass not necessarily will keep you out of the job. Assault will keep you out of the job. A domestic violence will keep you out of the job. And so I think it's, you know, to understand what goes on in these parks and these different places where people are, there's a lot of things happening out there that some go unreported. And it only gets to the point where they might call the police for them to come to the park when it's really bad. And when it's really bad, now we're dealing with something that is not a misdemeanor anymore. And it's really going to stop people from moving forward.
Councilmember Trout Manuel.
This is for Ken. Ken, with that woman that you're dealing with now, how many situations have you had like that? And how do we get help to them?
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, I'm dealing with, there's a lot of people who have a lot of drug addictions in there, and people who come to me asking for help who have drug addictions, but then, you know, they're in a clear state of mind when they're not using. And so we have a great conversation, and then I'll see them in their drug addiction, and you just have to wait for them to come to that point where they're again, you know, able to sit down and have a conversation. Right now, just recently, we had a guy who I dealt with a while ago. Him and his wife finally had some situation where they broke up, and he just got kicked out of the night shelter because he was shooting up on our property. And so I've seen him wandering around, you know, on the corner, and he knows who I am, and I talk to him, and I'll address him, ask him if he's okay. I know what he needs, I know what he wants, but he's not ready yet. And so those are just, you know, we don't have, there's nothing we can do about that right now. But if it becomes a point where he's in the parks and he's shooting up in the parks, or he's lighting fires in the parks, then it becomes something that we really have to address to keep everybody safe.
Thank you for everything you're doing for us.
No, thank you.
Jeff, I believe you had something that you wanted to offer.
I just want to say that I want it to be really well understood, and this might be going back to Councilmember Malenga's question too. If it's a civil infraction, that means our response to go out to a public piece of property is to offer help. That'll always be there, to hand over a ticket, and to walk away. We don't interrupt the cycle. The folks who are receiving the ticket, that is not the worst part of their day. Having to pay something $50 or $250 2 weeks from now, or appear in court or something like that, that is a month from now or 2 months from now, people, as they do now, ignore the ticket. It does not interrupt the cycle. And while nobody wants to arrest their way out of this, you can't. Having that as a backstop, having that to be part of your talking point, that look, you've got options. The option we're hoping you choose is that you work with us and we get you out of this situation. But, you know, the other options are some that you can define, like you could go somewhere else if you wanted to. We hope you don't. We want to help you. But you can't perpetually stay in these locations in public settings. It's not humane. It's not safe. People are being harmed out there. It's not healthy. It's bad for the environment. And I just want it to be real clear, because ultimately, whatever council decides, I don't want to appear as though I'm trying to challenge council, but you get the phone calls as much as we do about what can the city do when something pops up. And civil infractions, issuing tickets, means that we're not breaking the cycle, we're pushing people around. And that's visible. I think that's, you know, again, it's not the humane or it's find it a struggle for that to be the approach, because you know that every couple of weeks you're going to continue to have the same conversation and the same interaction. That's what happens today. So I just wanted to be real clear what the city response looks like under a civil infraction approach.
And Deputy Mayor, did you have another question, or is your hand?
No, I do have a comment. I really appreciate what Kent said about him going to court and advocating for these folks. I believe in my heart that with Kent's involvement, with our prosecutors working closely with Kent, and hopefully with the judges, working with everybody in the situation, that situation can be resolved once that misdemeanor has been issued. And as Kent said, perhaps community service, perhaps other methods, but it's hard to say in some respects because, you know, I've gone through this in my own personal life with a family member. And sometimes it takes that slap up against the head in some respects to make a difference. And in my family member, it was that person's own slap on that person's own head that made the difference, and the life has been turned around. But it took about 7 years for that to happen. So I'm trusting in the fact that we have the pieces of this puzzle in place, especially with Kent on board. And as we go further in this, after Councilmember Stearns is finished with his other amendments, I would like to also offer an amendment on part of this ordinance as well.
Thank you. Councilmember Jayraj.
I have a question for Kent and Director Tate. My question is this: there are people out there, that's their lifestyle. So when it's their lifestyle and they don't want to integrate into the society, what are we going to do? I mean, yes, we can take them to court and ask them to do a lot of things, but at the end of the day, if they don't want to do it, they don't want to get off the street. They don't want to stop camping. Being homeless is their lifestyle. So, do we put them in jail?
You want me to answer that?
Yeah.
So let me tell you a story. Hopefully this will answer your question. So before I got into building Redmond's program and now building Auburn's program, I was a probation officer for 9 years at Seattle Municipal Court. I had a guy on my caseload who they called him the Teddy Bear Bandit. And I'm not sure exactly. He tried to tell me the story, but he had a long history of mental health and issues and drug addiction. And he would go and rob stores, and then he would go to jail. He would get out, and then he would sell fake drugs, and then get beat up, and he would go to jail. And it's a cycle. And he's always come through years and years on probation in mental health court. I didn't see him for a long time, and then I got a job at Redmond doing their outreach program, and I saw him in the library, and he was dressed up in a suit, and he was a Jehovah's Witness, and he was living in a home now in Redmond. And I was talking to him, and he remembered who I was, and we had a good conversation, and we laughed, and it was good to see him. But he was able to turn his life around. It took a long time and a lot of court stuff, but he was able to find whatever he needed to turn his life around. And he started coming to community court, and he would bring cookies to everybody and check in with people and talk to the police officers. So what I would tell you is sometimes, I know how we look at jail, how we look at court, but it could be used in the right way to help people. Some people need a little more structure than others. Some people don't need as much structure as others. I'm not saying lock people up. As a probation officer, I never wanted to lock people up, but I really had real conversations about people of what they're really trying to accomplish and what are we trying to do here and what do they want their life to look like, right? Sometimes jail can be a tool for some people who are addicts, and they go in there and they get clean and sober, and you can have a conversation with them about what treatment really looks like and going from jail to treatment rather than from street to treatment. So, it all depends on the person. It all depends on how you use the system. It's about how you talk to people. It's about just a whole bunch of things that go into trying to help people. And at the end of the day, it's really people making a decision on what they really want to do. So for folks who don't want to participate in Auburn, I'll be real frank with you, is we offer as much help as possible. If you don't want to participate, that's fine, but you don't have to stay in Auburn. There are other cities that allow you to do that. But what we want to create here is a city that we don't accept homelessness here. You cannot come here just to be homeless. We want you to be a part of this community. We want you to be successful. We want you to be the best you can be here. And that means we need you to get up and come to the table and meet us halfway so we can help you get to where you need to be.
Thank you. Jeff, I believe you had something, and then Councilmember Brown.
Yeah, I was just going to add that in other ordinances in years past, where council rightfully is kind of struggling with, different spectrum of philosophy and what the approach should be. I do want to say that it's always an option for us to include in an ordinance that the ordinance has an effect for, say, 12 months that requires we bring back some data to show, so the council would know, like, how often was this even really going to happen? How likely is it? I mean, I don't want to speak for Kent, but I bet you anything that 99% of the time, the most important thing is to say the city has this authority. Only 1% of the time do you want to exercise the authority. I mean, you never want to get there. And that is the same philosophy that we really hold with so many of our other types of codes and regulations. Is it's about education and helping people and getting people to the right spot. I mean, nobody wants to be punitive, and nobody wants to make it harder for people to get out of that situation. So I just say, as a concept, that may be something that council might want to consider, is that, is there a way for us to report periodically to council on, what do the interactions look like, and does this even really happen, or how often does it happen?
Thank you. Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have to say I'm here to speak against the amendment. I know that Councilmember Stearns is making this motion to amend with the purest of motives. And I was thinking that I would be supporting this. But, when I heard Mr. Kent Hay describe his experiences, it made an impression on me that perhaps we need to give this approach an opportunity. And then, as Director Tate said, take a look at it. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you. Councilmember Stearns.
I was just going to agree with Jeff that, I don't, as he said, you never want to do this. And that's really all I'm saying is we won't. But I do agree that, it would be important to get data back. So my sense would be that if we did pass this amendment, then it would be really important to get data back from Jeff and Kent on how often, is our services being, turned down, and how often is there a situation where, someone probably should be arrested. But I wouldn't, I don't think it's the right approach to say, well, we need to have the power to arrest them in our back pocket, and then let's see how things go. I'd rather not arrest them and then see how things go, and get that information from Jeff and Kent as on a, I guess would be on a regular basis. Anyway, that's my thoughts on that.
Councilmember Baggett, did you have a comment?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Your Honor. And again, I know that Chris Stearns has the best motives and best ideas about how to, I don't want to use the word simplify this process, but as president of 3 homeowner associations for a number of years, more than 20 years, we have gone through a lot of the things having to do with fines and fees and things of that nature, albeit for our residents, and try to control our rules and regulations and what have you. And we have found that a slap on the wrist or just a very minor application of a fee or fine or just a warning doesn't get their attention. This has to be a deterrent, and you have to have the right amount of ammunition in your toolkit in order to let them know that they have this thing staring at them in the face if they want to perpetuate it. And I believe that all of the measures that Kent puts into play, and we have as our first order of business when we approach these folks, they have options, and if they select to oppose it and continue doing that, there has to be some kind of a penalty that's out there that can be applied if they oppose it repeatedly. And I think that the way this ordinance is written, it has the punitive damages in there that can be applied. And I think it will be enough to get their attention. If you slap them on the wrist or you just slap them up the side of the head to get their attention, they may or may not take that on and accept it. And they have to actually have something there that's strong enough to make them change their ways or move on. Thank you.
Thank you. And I know you don't mean physically slap them upside of the head, neither you nor the deputy mayor. I just want to make that clear in case anyone out there listening has a concern.
No, I use the expression occasionally, a baseball bat up the side of the head, but never to apply that.
It is a figure of speech and we do not condone violence.
Absolutely.
Right. Councilmember Malinga.
Thank you, Your Honor. I've been listening to, both sides of the argument, and I think one thing that I think Jeff said, and then Councilmember Stearns also reiterated, was it would be good to see the data, because for me personally, I would like to see, how many folks out there that are repeat offenders that are purposely choosing not to abide by the rules and keep coming back, and what the situation is. For me, it's really hard to, I guess what we've been saying, criminalize. I don't want to use that word, criminalize homelessness, but for me, I'm struggling very, very hard with this potential misdemeanor charge for folks coming back to the park. I mean, if there was some data to show that this is going on and on and on, and we've given warning, and you can show me that, then I would understand that a little bit better. But as I'm thinking about it now, it's really hard the way it's been presented right now to agree with this. Thank you.
Kent, did you have any comment to that? I know it's not hard data right at this point, but if you have something to share about your experiences so far here in Auburn.
No, I'll just give you one. I mean, I could give you a lot of success stories, but I just want to give you one story that hopefully becomes a success. But there's a guy I've been out here dealing with in the parks. He's a magnet for garbage. The man collects garbage like nobody's business. And we've cleaned up behind him, spent a lot of money cleaning up behind him in all the parks and in the shopping carts and all that stuff. And so he ended up getting trespassed. I didn't trespass him. The police got to a point where they trespassed him from the park. I found him in another park, and he was in the what's it called?
It was in the dugout.
The dugout. And so he was urinating in there and doing all that stuff. And so, of course, the smell was really bad, and people were upset because, they're walking their dogs, and there's a guy sleeping in the dugout, and he has a whole bunch of trash in his shopping carts and that type of stuff. And I've always offered to work with him. He's in the running for a housing voucher. We just have to make a phone call, but I can't get him to do that because I'm chasing him around in circles. The last time I met him, he was in the park, so I was giving him a little pass because he could be arrested. He's already trespassing. He's in the park, so I'm trying to work with him and trying to get him motivated to make this phone call so we can get him into housing. The last time I told him, I'd still work with him, and as long as we're working together, I'll help you figure this whole thing out. I came back one day, somebody had dumped 2 mattresses in one of the parks in the garbage cans. He pulled the mattresses out, set up shop inside the dugout with 2 mattresses and his shopping cart and all the trash. And I came back and I told him it was unacceptable. And he said, well, I'm just, I'm just laying here, and what, somebody left these here and they're good mattresses and I'm just here. And I said, well, you can't do that. And he said, well, what are you gonna do about it? Like, you can't do anything about it, right? And I said, well, you're not even supposed to be here, man. I could have you arrested for trespassing because you're trespassing now. So I'm asking you to get up. I'll give you till tomorrow morning to get all this stuff out of here and put it back in the trash and, get up. And so I came back the next morning, and I think the officers had already been there because we got a police report from the neighbors because they were scared. He was looking at people's houses. He was, they couldn't walk their dogs and all that stuff. And so again, if it was an infraction, he wouldn't care about that. If I said I'm going to write you a ticket, there's no way we get that guy out of the dugout so that people could enjoy the park, or we didn't have to spend $1,000 or $900 of taxpayers' money to clean up after him, for him to move to another park to spend another $900 to clean up after him. But the moral of the story too, though, is he understands. I met him again in the alleyway. I saw him at the bus stop. I'm talking to him. I made phone calls to try to get his HIN voucher. We have an understanding. So he understands that, yes, you know my role. I'm here to help you, but at the same time, I'm going to hold you accountable. And so we have a strong relationship because it's built on treating him like a human being. That's how we treat human beings. There has to be compassion and accountability.
Manuel.
Yes, Ken, in the short time that you have been here, I know you probably haven't started a database and stuff like that.
I have.
But have you? Okay, because I know that in the past, we've always asked how many homelessness are we actually have here in Auburn. And we, during the counting night, everything's all put together. So there has never been a real total to be given to us and how many homelessness we have here in Auburn. So I am all for, like Council Member Maligna and also Council Member Stearns, to get a data to us so that we know exactly how many homeless people we are dealing with here in Auburn, how many are actually from Auburn, how many are coming into Auburn. It would be really nice for us to have something tangible to look at and be able to pass ordinance or resolutions that we need to help also our director, Tate.
Yeah. And one of the things, and just so you know about how when I interact with people, is I'm not the police. So I carry the police radio, but one of the things I don't do is when I get to people, start asking them a whole bunch of questions about where they're from, what their name is, and all that, because that really stops the conversation from happening when you start asking people those questions. So it does take time to be able to, because I just start working with people immediately. I don't ask for names for the most part. I want people to know that we're out to help them and not that you're just another number and we're collecting information and I might not come back. Because most of the people that I run into don't think I'll ever come back. They think they say somebody's come out to help them and never returned. And so my goal was really to start working with people right then and there. And sometimes I don't ask all those questions. So it just takes me a little bit to start that conversation.
And I might add that I know Kent has provided this invitation before, and Jeff went out with Kent last Friday. I highly encourage you to connect with Kent and dress in very warm, safe clothing, but to go out and follow Kent into the bushes and back into some pretty scary areas to see what he is dealing with. And I will leave it at that, but it helps with your perspective on what Kent is dealing with and the approach of compassionate accountability in the city of Auburn. All right, are there any other questions or comments from council before we vote on the amendment? And Sean, do you have the amendment written down to where you could provide? Councilmember Stearns, did you have another comment?
I was just going to thank everyone. This is quite a long and really important discussion, and it's fantastic to engage with this. And that was it.
Thank you. All right, Sean, I will turn my volume down, and if you turn yours up, you can read the amendment.
So the amendment, as I understand it, is to remove the criminal trespass section in section 2.22.220 and insert a class 1 civil infraction pursuant to chapter 7.80 RCW. And in addition,
Can barely hear you.
For
Can't hear.
sorry, I missed the.
Mayor, we can barely hear her.
Can't hear me?
It's really low.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. So in section 2, Auburn City Code 2.22.220, section A, removing the words criminal trespass and adding the words class 1 infraction pursuant to chapter 7.08.
7.80.
Sorry, yes, thank you. And then in section 4, removing criminal trespass.
Is that under section E penalty? Yes, the last bullet E prior to section 5.
Sorry about that, yes.
Mayor Nancy, she's still breaking up. She is breaking up and you can't hear all of what she's saying.
Okay, so Councilmember Stearns has shared his screen again. So the motion is to remove criminal penalties in section 2.22.220 and section 9.50.30E and replace them with the civil infraction penalties by adding the following in each section. Violation of this section constitutes a class 1 civil infraction pursuant to chapter 7.80 RCW. Okay. So you would be voting on an amendment to remove the enforcement misdemeanor and moving back in fact, in my copy, I am looking at an electronic version on page 127 of 249 or page 3 of 11 of the ordinance, section 2.22.220. It actually has crossed out class 1 civil infraction pursuant to chapter 7.80 RCW. Are there questions on the amendment? All right, I don't see that there are any questions. All those in favor of the amendment, and I'm going to do this by roll call vote because I have a feeling there are going to be some yays and some nays. So all those in favor of the amendment, removing the criminal aspect and moving it to a class 1 civil infraction pursuant to chapter 7.80 RCW. I will ask Sean to do a roll call vote. So if you are in favor of the amendment, you would say aye. If you are against the amendment, you would say no or nay. Do you want me to do the roll call or does?
Got it.
Okay.
Deputy Mayor DeCoursey,
No.
Councilmember Baggett,
No.
Councilmember Brown,
No.
Councilmember J. Raj,
Yes.
Councilmember Malenga,
Aye for yes.
Councilmember Stearns,
Yes.
Councilmember Trout Manuel,
Yes.
Okay. The amendment passes. Member Stearns, you have another amendment.
Yes, Your Honor. I hope these are quicker. I really appreciate everyone's time. So the second amendment is simply to codify what is in the preamble, and that is, as our staff has discussed, it's a services first approach. And this is one of those things where I think we're all in agreement. In fact, I know in Jeff's memo, he addressed this issue.
Member Stearns, we need you to make the amendment and then you can speak to it after there's a.
Sorry, I apologize, Your Honor. I move to amend the ordinance to codify the services first approach by adding in section 4 a new number 3 that says the city does not offer housing, mental health, drug addiction, employment, or other types of services to that person on the date that the prohibited activity occurs, semicolon, or. And I can share that, I believe. Hold on. So am I still unmuted?
You are unmuted, Councilmember Stearns.
Okay, so this simply just to put what's in the preamble into the actual city ordinance itself. I had suggested this in an earlier draft, and Director Tate, I think he has a different view, but he did say that if we were to do this, it would not be a definition, and this is I'm following his suggestion on that approach by putting it into the actual standard, not the definition. But it just simply says we're not going to take enforcement action against a person unless we make that services first approach, which I think we're all in agreement that we are going to do. So I'd rather see that in the actual code rather than just as a preamble. I believe it's stronger, and it's in keeping with everything that we're standing for. Thank you, Your Honor.
Councilmember Stearns, just a clarification. Where are you wanting that inserted in section 4?
It would be on page 5 of the draft ordinance under section C, which is exceptions. And then there are 4 exceptions listed. And this would be a new number 3 right before the person is camping, but following number 2, which is the person is experiencing homelessness.
So he wants to remove what's there in 3?
Councilmember Stearns, are you wanting to remove the current item 3, or are you wanting to add that as 3 and then changing 3 to 4 and 4 to 5?
The latter, Your Honor. I wanted to insert that and then renumber the remainder accordingly.
All right. So what you're saying is the prohibitions contained in subsection A shall not apply if
right.
the city does not offer housing, mental health, drug addiction, employment, or other types of services to that person on the date that the prohibited activity occurs.
That's correct.
Okay, that,
We're saying, so that section is, we're not going to take enforcement action against that person if the following happens. And so if it's a trespass, we're not going to do that. If the person is experiencing homelessness and there is no overnight shelter, we're not going to do that. Or the person is camping and they have a, they paid the fee and they're meeting all the requirements, we're not going to do that. This section simply says we're also not going to do it unless we first offer them services. It's the exact same language that's in the preamble. We just put that into the code saying that we are going to offer it. That's the effect, to say that we are going to offer those services first.
okay, it's, I'm still trying to grasp it. It seems a little backwards or convoluted to me, but where is it in the preamble?
Let's see. It would be whereas, I believe it's on page 2, the third whereas, and it's the second clause. The first is the city is committed to a service first philosophy. And the second clause is then the city staff implement administrative practices where housing, mental health, drug addiction, employment, and other types of services are offered prior to punitive enforcement action. So I'm taking that second clause and just putting it, moving it, well, I'm keeping it in the preamble, but I'm putting it actually in the ordinance itself.
Okay.
I'm not sure if the city attorney has any thoughts on.
I was just going to ask if the city attorney might be able to provide clarifying work.
I can understand the gist of what's being offered. I don't know if I can clarify the language without stepping on the motion, but I can tell you that if language to this effect is added, it's going to make enforcement pretty difficult, because if we try to enforce, or anybody tries to enforce, you know, they're going to say, well, this doesn't apply to me because you didn't offer X services. Well, you offered this service, but not this one, or these two, but not three, or you didn't offer all of them, and it kind of injects some vagueness in there. So that's, I think, why it was left in the preamble to talk about the intent behind the ordinance, but not the day-to-day practice and enforcement. But as I understand the wording, it's the enforcement would not apply unless we offer services, and we just have to say what those are.
Right, but I think we're saying that's what we're going to do, and then if we say that, why all of a sudden is it going to be a problem to do that? And we're letting the world know this is our approach, and if you're saying it sounds like that actually won't be our approach because we couldn't do it, or?
It can be the approach, certainly, but it's just a matter of enforcing it. If I were going to enforce this in court with a citation or something, the defense is always going to be, well, it says here that it doesn't apply to me because you didn't offer other types of services. And sure, you offered mental health, but you didn't offer me drug addiction. Or sure, you offered me housing, but you didn't offer me mental health. Or you offered me employment, but you didn't offer all of them.
Okay,
It just injects.
You're talking about like just drafting. I'm not saying you have to offer all of them. It's an or, not an and.
Well,
it's. I mean, that's pretty clear from, you know, how drafting is. The or at the end of those commas makes it, you know, A, B, C, D, or E, not A, B, C, D, and that's how we have it in the preamble. I mean, in the preamble, it says the same thing. It's like, wow, we got to offer all of those things first? No, we don't. It's pretty clear just from drafting. The or makes it like A, B, C, D, or E, not all of the above.
Okay, before we continue forward, we need to have a second. The discussion shouldn't be taking place until we have a second. So is there a second? Councilmember Trout Manuel.
Mayor, I'll second that.
All right, thank you. And now we can have the discussion. And so, Mr. City Attorney, if I understand correctly, what you're saying is that muddies the waters, if you will, in a court to have this section in the ordinance as opposed to in the preamble.
It could, for enforcement and interpreting this, you know, when you're going to be asking judges and such to interpret this and who it applies to and who it doesn't, and whether there's a valid defense to an enforcement action or not. And when you have other types of services or something in there, they could say, well, whatever you offered wasn't enough. It wasn't the right type of service. You should have offered X or something. And it just creates the ability to, you know, it's open to interpretation as to whether or not it should apply or not.
Okay.
It's just something to consider.
Council, do you, are there any comments or questions? If you'd please use the raise your hand tool so that I can see in what order people are raising their hand. Before I call on Councilmember Stearns, is there anyone else that wants to speak? All right, Councilmember Stearns.
So, I mean, the reason I brought this forward was just because I do feel strongly that, you know, if we can, whenever we can, it's better to, you know, in layman's terms, put our money where our mouth is. But I mean, I certainly understand from the extensive discussion we had earlier, and you know, how committed we are to a services first approach. You know, my sense was that this would be a relatively straightforward amendment and it would not cause confusion, but I certainly appreciate what the city attorney is saying, and that it might in fact cause us some trouble at the court level. And so with that being said, I'm okay with withdrawing the motion if that's appropriate.
Okay, you can withdraw the motion, but then I would need Councilmember Trout Manuel to second the withdrawal. So if you'd like to make that motion.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move to withdraw the motion.
Thank you, Councilmember Trout Manuel.
And I move to withdraw the second.
Thank you. All right.
Okay.
And Councilmember Stearns, did you have another amendment?
Yes, Your Honor. I have one more amendment, and that goes to the to section 1 of the proposed draft ordinance, which is section that creates or amends section 2.22.10, tents and shelters, and that's on page 3 of the proposed ordinance. And what I'm seeking to do is to strike the first sentence of section 1, which says, unless for a city permitted event, no person shall erect, maintain, use, or occupy in any city of Auburn Park a tent or shelter that does not have an unobstructed view through such tent or shelter from at least 2 sides.
Okay. Is there a second? Councilmember Trout Manuel.
I'll second that, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Stearns, would you like to address your motion?
I would. Oh, good. I'm already unmuted. So I would like to share this. So the little graph explains where my motion is coming from. And it has to do with the shelter and the privacy that having a closed tent provides. But just as a breakdown of where we are right now, in city parks, no camping is allowed under current law, under our proposed ordinance, or under the amendment I am proposing. The second column is daytime two-sided tents. I say that as an older person because in my day growing up, tents only had 4 sides. Now they have all kinds, but I'm just trying to put this in layman terms that an open tent, we'll say, two-sided tent, that's allowed under any current configuration, current law, the proposed amendment, or my amendment. And then the third column is what my amendment really affects. And that's whether a closed or 4-sided tent is allowed. Under current law, it is. Under the proposed amendment, it is not. Under the proposed ordinance, it is not. But under my proposed ordinance, my proposed amendment, we would allow 4-sided tents. And I base the amendment simply on the fact that human beings, homeless people, I think that's really who we're talking about here, that they deserve the same right to shelter, to sleep, to privacy that everyone else has, especially as we're coming upon the fall and the winter, and there'll be wind, rain, and snow. And simply just because, you know, you live outside, or you can't enter a house, or you can't get into an apartment at this particular time, that you still deserve the same right of protection and the same right of, you know, privacy and protection from the elements as any regularly housed person has. So my amendment is based simply on that definition of what you know, basically I'm trying to protect the right to have a closed shelter. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Are there comments from council? Councilmember Malinga.
I was trying to find exactly, Councilmember Stearns, where you're talking about in the ordinance.
Oh, it's on page 3, and it's the very first section of the ordinance, and it says 2.22.210, overnight use tents and shelters, and overnight use is struck through. And in the very first sentence, that's what I'm seeking to strike.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Trout Manuel.
After I was reading this and reviewing this, I've always said that everyone has the right to have a roof over their heads. And if Ken can't find a place for our people so that they could have a shelter over their heads meantime while they're waiting to find something, I also agree that, you know, they should be able to have an opening so they can look out and not feel so confined. But yeah, that's what I just wanted to say on that.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from council, or Jeff or Kent, any comments on?
No, I don't have anything.
Okay. All right. If there are no other comments, the amendment that Councilmember Jayraj.
Thank you, Your Honor. Quick question. Public parks can be any of the parks, residential parks, could be Game Farm Park, could be the Parks and Rec Park. Most of the residential parks is near homes. And my concern is people using that as a tent area. How is that going to be looked at is my question. I mean, I don't think I would mind if it's not a residential park, but if it's a residential park, I have an issue. Because I know my neighbors wouldn't be very happy.
So Councilmember Stearns, I will say that there are residents around every park that we have in the city to some degree. So while you may be talking about a neighborhood park, as opposed to some of our larger parks, there are residential areas around every park that we have. If that helps. Or Director Faber, I see that you are on the call. Is there something that you might like to add or to help answer Councilmember Jayraj?
Well, I think what the differential, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I think what the differential would be that you have some parks, let's say, are more active parks, like in your neighborhood with the two relatively new ones, Les Gove Park, where in the past they weren't allowed to have four sides on a tent, mainly for a couple of reasons. The comfort of other people going around the park, knowing that potential ill repute wasn't in there and the police could actually view in on occasion. And so you would have that at maybe your active parks like Fulmer, Brannan, where there's quite a bit of activity going on. I think the issue here is when you get to a park that's more of an open space like Fenster, the upcoming park at 104th Street, the old pig farm beach along the river, Isaac Evans, where potentially now we are talking about more of a homeless population that is using that tent for shelter. So I think we have two different issues. We honestly haven't had tenting as a real problem in what I would call our active neighborhood parks. In my years here, that really hasn't been an issue. It was previously a little bit at Les Gove. So I think the differentiation is between what I would consider an open space park along a river versus an active park with ball fields and tennis courts, etc.
Thank you, Daryl. Councilmember Stearns.
Thank you, Your Honor. Council Member Jayraj, I just wanted to try to also answer your question. Right now, I mean, well, for instance, I mean, this ordinance does not differentiate at all between residential and say larger parks. And right now, tents are okay. Right now, you can't camp overnight. That's an important backstop. But right now, there's nothing to stop people from bringing in tents. And under the new ordinance, there's still nothing to stop people from bringing in tents. They'll probably just keep them open, perhaps, but they can still bring them in. So, you know, I think that's, I mean, it feels like that issue is something of, you know, are some parks different than others? And that's probably a good issue to look at, but that's really not in this proposed ordinance, it's not in the proposed amendment. The amendment only affects the number of sides a tent can have. It doesn't allow more tents in, and it doesn't block, you know, tents. It doesn't allow tents overnight, and it doesn't stop tents from coming in. So I hope that that's helpful too.
Any other questions or comments? All right, hearing none, I am going to ask for a voice or a roll call vote on this one as well. And so the amendment and the motion that is before council is in section 1, 2.22.210. And the motion is to strike the first sentence, which says, unless for a city permitted event, No person shall erect, maintain, use, or occupy in any City of Auburn park a tent or shelter that does not have an unobstructed view through such tent or shelter from at least two sides, meaning that there would need to be at least visibility through from two sides of the tent or shelter. All right, Sean, if you will do a roll call vote, please.
Deputy Mayor DeCoursey,
Aye.
Councilmember Baggett,
Aye.
Councilmember Brown,
Aye.
Councilmember J-Raj,
Aye.
Councilmember Malinga,
Aye.
Councilmember Stearns,
Aye.
Councilmember Trent Manuel,
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Right, Councilmember Stearns, was that the end of your amendments?
Your Honor, I believe that you asked if that was it for me. Yes, that is the final amendment I have to offer.
All right, thank you. Council members, are there any other amendments?
Deputy Mayor DeCoursey had said he had an amendment.
Deputy Mayor DeCoursey.
I'm sorry, I just lost all my screen stuff. So no, with the changes that were adopted with the First Amendment, I have no need to add another amendment.
Okay. All right. So all those in favor of ordinance number 6781 as amended, please say aye.
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 All opposed,
Aye.
say no. Passes. All right, we will now move on to ordinance number 6776. Back to my agenda here. An ordinance updating section 10.36.191 of the Auburn City Code. Sean, do you have your? There's an echo. Okay. Ordinance number 6776. An ordinance updating section 10.36.191 of the Auburn City Code related to the parking of recreational vehicles in the right-of-way. I'm not sure who was first. Councilmember Malinga.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move to adopt ordinance number 6776.
Thank you. Councilmember J-Raj. Councilmember J-Raj, were you wanting to second that?
I second that motion, Your Honor.
Thank you. Councilmember Malinga.
Yes, ordinance number 6776 authorizes adoption of the proposed changes to the Auburn City Code, section 10.36.191, relating to the parking and recreation of vehicles. The parking code includes the following. 1, it limits the RV parking to 24 hours citywide within the public right-of-way. 2, it creates a parking permit program to allow RV parking in residential areas for up to 72 hours with limitations. And 3, it prohibits occupation of RVs overnight in the right-of-way.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of ordinance number 6776, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say no. Passes. All right, ordinance number 6783, an ordinance amending ordinance number 6693, the 2019-2020 biennial budget ordinance, as amended by ordinance number 6712, ordinance number 6719, ordinance number 6720, ordinance number 6751, and ordinance number 6764, authorizing amendment to the City of Auburn 2019-2020 budget as set forth in Schedule A and Schedule B. Councilmember Baggett.
Thank you, Your Honor. This represents the 7th budget amendment for the 2019 to 2020 biennium and the 3rd budget amendment for 2020. And the ingredients of this particular ordinance.
Councilmember Baggett, I don't
Yes.
need the motion. I believe you're explaining it.
I'm sorry. I make a motion to adopt Ordinance 6783.
Thank you. Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would like to second the passage or second motion for 6783.
Thank you. Councilmember Baggett.
Thank you. Sorry about that, folks. Again, this particular ordinance involves the 7th budget amendment for the 2019-2020 biennium and the 3rd budget amendment for 2020. Now included in this is a fund balance adjustments. You've got COVID-19 related adjustments, and you also have added budget authority for new programs and other expected changes. The total budget amendment for this number 7 is $26.4 million approximately.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor of ordinance number 6783, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say no. Passes. Ordinance number 6785, an ordinance amending section 3.40.020, 3.41.010, 3.42.020, 3.84.040, and 3.88.040 of the Auburn City Code relating to the use of taxes imposed on utilities. Is there a motion? We have a motion. Deputy Mayor DeCoursey.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to adopt ordinance number 6785.
Thank you. Councilmember Baggett.
I'll second that, Your Honor.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor DeCoursey.
Thank you, Mayor. We've had sessions on this prior from Director Thomas explaining the utility tax rates, and I believe everything in the packet is pretty self-explanatory.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from council? All those in favor of ordinance number 6785, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say no. Passes. All right, ordinance number 6786. And before I read that one in, we have a presentation from Director Tate.
Thank you. So ordinance number 6786, or the Just Cause Eviction Ordinance, has been before council 3 times before this evening. First, it was presented at a July 13th study session, and it was advanced to the July 20th City Council meeting for action. From July 13th to July 20th, the city received somewhere between 12 and 15 public comments on the Just Cause Eviction Ordinance. Some of those comments were in favor of the ordinance, some were opposed to the ordinance, and some provided specific feedback on specific sections of the ordinance. So what council did on July 20th was enacted one provision related to a temporary measure, and then asked staff to look at the public comments that had been received and return to City Council at the August 24th study session for some further discussion. Recall that back then, there was a fear that the governor's moratorium on eviction, tenant eviction, was set to expire on August 1st. So with the governor extending the moratorium, it provided a little bit of breathing room. So council or staff evaluated the comments, and it was particularly useful in looking at the comment letters that suggested different types of changes within specific sections. And we returned on August 24th with an updated version. On August 20th, so just a few days before that study session, that follow-up study session, we did receive an additional public comment that came in via email. And that was emailed at that time directly to Mayor Backus, Deputy Mayor DeCourcy, and council members Trout Manuel, Brown, and Baggett. So while all of the comments that have been received, or the lion's share at least, that have been received leading up to the July 20th meeting had really been from the perspective of multifamily property owners or property managers, there had not been really any perspective brought forward from single-family residential property owners. So the August 20th email that was presented to council was from a single-family residential property owner who owns a rental house in Auburn, and that was being rented out because his job took him away to a different country. So that's what he was doing during that period of time with the home that he owned in Auburn. So one, I just wanted to make sure the council had the benefit of making sure that that email and that comment had been seen and read and kind of understood. Also, I do think that there are some provisions with the property owner that I think might be useful to help in his particular situation. But generally speaking, making sure that council is aware that, the way the ordinance is written right now, it has an implementation date of October 16th. And that's the date that it's assumed that, that's the date that the governor's moratorium would expire unless he extends it again. But to also let council know that there is an option available to you that I didn't want to pass by, since we didn't talk about it during any of the study session. We weren't able to address this comment specifically. And that option is to either move the ordinance forward as it's written or to carve out a single family residential kind of piece to this and come back to council to talk more about single family residential rentals. I'm not making a recommendation of any kind. I just wanted to make sure that council, as you as a body, move forward, that's out there for you to consider. So that is all I have, unless there's any questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Brown, did you have a question for Jeff?
Yes, I did. Director Tate, if we were to table this motion, would that give staff opportunity to work on this for one of the two options that you spoke of, the single family residence carve out?
I think if I would, I don't mean to dice up the wording a little bit, but I think that we could certainly come back to City Council before the implementation date, and we could talk a little bit more about what the ordinance means for single family residential. The ordinance right now, as it's written, treats single family and multifamily the same. And there's going to be some basis for saying that that's appropriate. But then there may be some perspective of how they could be treated differently. And, in the end, a just cause eviction ordinance is mainly about making sure that tenants are treated fairly. So a tenant of a single family residence and a tenant of a multifamily apartment unit, I think everybody is striving to make sure that all tenants are treated fairly, and really for the landlords too, to be operating under a consistent system. I just didn't want to skip over the fact that we never really did have a dialogue about the impact on single family homes, and especially since a member of our community took the time to write a comment letter asking that there be some additional considerations given. I mean, the reality is the comment letter that was written, I mean, I'm presenting, you know, from a perspective of saying that there's single family and there's multifamily, and that might be deserving of some evaluation. But there are details in that comment letter that the individual included that council hasn't really talked about. And again, whenever anybody takes the time to put comments together and submit them, I know that we all feel that we want to give that the due time and thought that is appropriate. So I don't want to, I guess, sorry for being wordy, but I don't want to skip over the length of that email and the fact that the individual is calling out a number of different things that he finds flawed with the ordinance. And I don't know if there's a good basis for you know, what's been presented or not, but I haven't looked at it through that lens of single family ownership.
Okay, if you have specific questions for Director Tate, I will call on you. Otherwise, I'm going to read the ordinance into the record. We have not done that yet. If you have a specific question for the director, keep your hand raised on the screen. Otherwise, if you would lower it for a moment. Okay, Deputy Mayor DeCoursey.
Thank you, Mayor. Director Tate, just as you mentioned, adding the single family portion to this, what kind of a time frame would staff need to look at if we decided to bring this back to council again?
Okay for me to answer that, Mayor, right now? Okay. So I think that the options, there's one of two options. One is we, with the ordinance as it's written, you table the ordinance and we come back to talk about single family, and then the full ordinance returns to council floor for action. The other option is, this is probably not Sean's favorite option, but is to exclude single family from the ordinance tonight and take action on a just cause eviction ordinance tonight that applies to multifamily and not single family. And so I say that because if it's the first option of tabling the whole ordinance, we need to return to you quickly, like within either the next study session or the study session after, because we're going to continue to advocate for action before the October 15th deadline. Otherwise, yeah.
Jeff, there's also, I believe, a third option, which would be to approve the entire ordinance this evening and bring back an updated version for discussion at an upcoming council meeting, correct?
That is true, yeah. Because even if an action occurs tonight, the implementation date is October 16th.
All right. I'll tell you, I am going to read the motion in and ask for a motion in a second before we continue with the discussion. We're getting a little blurry on the lines here. So ordinance number 6786, an ordinance creating a new chapter 5.23 of the city code regarding a City of Auburn rental housing policy. We have a motion. Councilmember Jayraj.
I move to adopt ordinance number 6786, Your Honor. Thank you.
Councilmember Stearns.
I move to second that motion.
Okay. Councilmember Jayraj.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is a just cause eviction ordinance, protects tenants from being forced to leave their rental home without reasonable justification. Washington state law prohibits unfair, retaliatory evictions, a critical tenant protection, RCW 59.18.240, RCW 59.18.250. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Councilmember Stearns.
Thank you, Your Honor. I wholeheartedly support the ordinance. You know, people, families, our community members are in, you know, we're facing one of the greatest waves of evictions that our country has probably ever seen. And I think it is really important that we, you know, do what we can right now to protect those folks. I don't think I've seen the other comment that Director Tate had talked about, but I would love to see that. And I think that you know, if it's something we can address prior to implementation, I think that's worth a shot. But for now, I'd prefer to pass the ordinance as is and come back to it later.
So Sean did send all council members the email this afternoon or this evening so that everyone has seen it or everyone has access to it. Deputy Mayor DeCoursey.
There we go. Sorry. Sometimes the screen just kind of goes away. I have to agree with Councilmember Stearns. We've gone through this quite a few times now, and I was first thinking that we would move it to a future date, but I like what Director Tate said about coming back to us with the single family, and let's look at that portion of it. But moving forward now, and then being able to have the opportunity to have that other piece discussed and go forward with it from there, I would agree to do that, and hopefully we can do that perhaps at the next study session.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions from council? Okay, hearing none and seeing none. All those in favor of ordinance number 6786, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say no. Passes. Thank you. All right, ordinance number 6787, an ordinance amending sections 10.36.360 and 10.40.010 of the Auburn City Code relating to vehicle impounds. Councilmember Malinga.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. I move to adopt ordinance number 6787.
Thank you. Councilmember Jayraj.
I second that motion, Your Honor. Thank you.
Councilmember Malinga.
Auburn City Code 10.36.360 and code number 10.40.010 relate to vehicle impounds and towing when the city police impound a vehicle for towing. The proposed amendment would change the city code language to require payment of towing and storage fees before vehicle redemption unless otherwise provided by law.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? All right. All those in favor of ordinance number 6787, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say no. Passes. All right. Ordinance number 6788, an ordinance amending ordinance number 6777, extending the temporary waiver of late fees for utility accounts and airport fees, superseding certain sections of Auburn City Code requiring payment of such late fees as set forth in Auburn City Code 12.56.045, 13.06.300, 13.06.511, 13.20.390, and 13.48.120 in light of a declared public health emergency related to COVID-19. Is there a motion? Councilmember Jayraj.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move to adopt the ordinance number 6788.
Thank you. Councilmember Baggett.
I'll second that, Your Honor.
Thank you. Councilmember Jayraj.
Thank you, Your Honor. This ordinance extends the provision of ordinance number 6777, adopted by Council on June 15th, 2020. Ordinance number 6777 extended the temporary waiver of late fees for utility accounts and airport fees set forth in ordinance number 6767 to August 31st, 2020. Ordinance number 6767, adopted by Council on March 23rd, 2020, temporarily supersedes section of Auburn Municipal Code, which requires water shutoffs for delinquent utility accounts and late fees assessed on delinquent water, sewer, and airport consumption usage. These sections will be waived until the earlier of termination of the civil emergency proclaimed by the mayor on March 5th, 2020 or August 31st, 2020. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. I don't believe the new ordinance is set to expire on August 31st, 2020. I believe that.
That is correct, Mayor. That was the last extension was through August 31st.
Right. Okay. All right. Are there any questions or comments? Hearing none. All those in favor of ordinance number 6788, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say no. Passes. All right, resolution number 5543, a resolution amending the City Council Rules of Procedure. Deputy Mayor DeCoursey.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to adopt resolution 5543.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Brown.
I would like to second the motion to adopt 5543.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor DeCoursey.
Thank you, Mayor. We have gone through this, went through this in our last study session and had the update from our city attorney Como on this and moving this forward at this time to do the annual review and update of the council rules of procedure.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Councilmember Jayraj? No? Okay. Any questions or comments? All those, Councilmember Brown, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Deputy Mayor DeCoursey for his hard work on this. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. All those in favor of resolution number 5543, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say no. Passes. Resolution number, let's see, 55. Resolution number 5542, a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute a capital grant agreement with King County, Washington for youth and amateur sports grant funds and to appropriate and expend the grant funds. Councilmember Malinga.
Thank you. I move to adopt resolution number 5542.
Thank you. Is there a second? Councilmember Jayraj.
Thank you, Your Honor. I second that motion.
Thank you. Councilmember Malinga.
The city of Auburn received $125,000 King County Youth and Amateur Sports Grant to increase recreational opportunities in the county. The resolution number 5542 will authorize the mayor to execute a capital grant agreement with King County, Washington for that youth and amateur sports grant fund and to appropriate and expend the grant funds.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor of resolution number 5542, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say no. Passes. Resolution number 5545, resolution in support of the mayor's appointment nomination of Fife Mayor Kim Roscoe to the Pierce Transit Board. Is there a motion? Is there a motion? Councilmember Brown. Councilmember Brown, you are muted.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to move that we adopt resolution number 5545.
Thank you. Councilmember Stearns.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to second that motion.
Thank you. Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the act of one city supporting boards that support our city. That's Pierce Transit Board. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? All right, all those in favor of resolution number 5545, please say aye.
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 All opposed, please say no. Passes. All right. At this time, the mayor and city council may report on significant items associated with their appointed positions on federal, state, regional, and local organizations. Notice I said heavily on the may. We'll begin with Deputy Mayor DeCoursey.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm glad you said May, because I did have a report tonight, but in the essence of time here, because we've been here for a long time tonight, I'm going to bypass it and do my report next time. But I do want to take the moment again, once again, to thank Councilmember Trout Manuel and Councilmember J. Raj for their input and their productivity and hard work on the Council Rules of Procedure, and also once again, Director Como and former City Attorney Hyde for their assistance in working with me on this as well. And thank you, Council, for bringing this to conclusion tonight.
Thank you. Councilmember Baggett.
Thank you, Your Honor. In the interest of time, I think most of my meetings will be starting tomorrow. So I'll probably have a report at the next council meeting. Just a little acknowledgement here that one of our colleagues here is having a birthday tomorrow, and I would like to acknowledge that for Council Member Yolanda Trout Manuel.
Birthday in 2.5 hours.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Trout Manuel.
As Mr. DeCoursey, I did have a lengthy report, but due to the time, I'm going to save that for later.
Thank you. Let's see, where am I? Councilmember Brown.
No report tonight, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Malinga.
No report, but happy birthday, Councilmember Trout Manuel.
Councilmember Stearns.
Thank you, Your Honor. Yeah, happy birthday, Councilmember Trout Manuel. Keep the shootings of guns down. I just add that I've got one thing that I wanted to report on, and that's the King County Flood Control District. We've approved Auburn as a member, and we've approved a letter to the executive committee. I will share that via Antoinette with the rest of you tomorrow. And then I did want to say just one really brief thing about the mayor's proclamation for National Recovery Month. This is just so important, and the Recovery Month, and I'm just so grateful that that we know that addiction is not a moral weakness. It's not a lack of willpower or an unwillingness to stop. It's a medically diagnosable disease that is treatable. And I want to celebrate and recognize everyone who's in recovery in Auburn.
Thank you. Councilmember J. Raj.
Save the best for the last. I have something to report on, but I want to very quickly, for the sake of time, thank the staff, especially Pat Bailey and gang, and including you, for putting the COVID-19 site here in Auburn. Very well done. I've got more of a report, which I will present at the next meeting.
Thank you. And in the interest of time, I will pass on my report tonight, other than to again say happy birthday to Councilmember Troutman. May your day tomorrow be filled with every joy that you can think of. And we have no reason for a executive session tonight, and we are adjourned.